Chapter 4 of 17. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Jonathan Burchard, April 2009. 17 by Booth Tarkington. Chapter 4. Genesis and Clematis. Genesis and his dog were waiting just outside the kitchen door, and of all the world, these two creatures were probably the last in whose company William Sylvanus Baxter desired to make a public appearance. Genesis was an out-of-doors man and seldom made much of a toilet, his overalls in particular betraying at important points a lack of the anxiety he should have felt, since only Genesis himself, instead of a supplementary fabric, was directly underneath them, and the aged, grayish, sleeveless and necklace garment which sheltered him from waist to collarbone could not have been mistaken for a jersey, even though what there was of it was dimly of a jersey-esque character. Upon the feet of Genesis were things which careful study would have revealed to be patent leather dancing pumps, long dead and several times buried, and upon his head, pressing down his markedly criminal ears, was a once derby hat of a brown not far from Genesis' own color, though decidedly without his gloss. A large ring of strange metals with the stone missing adorned a finger of his right hand, and from a corner of his mouth projected an unlighted and spreading cigar stub which had the appearance of belonging to its present owner merely by right of salvage. And Genesis's dog, scratching himself at his master's feet, was the true complement of Genesis, for although he was a youngish dog, and had not long been the property of Genesis, he was a dog that would have been recognized anywhere in the world as a colored person's dog. He was not a special breed of dog, though there was something rather hound-like about him. He was just a dog. His expression was grateful but anxious, and he was unusually bald upon the bosom, but otherwise whitish and brownish, with a gaunt, haunting face and no power to look anybody in the eye. He rose apprehensively as the fuming William came out of the kitchen, but he was prepared to follow his master faithfully, and when William and Genesis reached the street, the dog was discovered at their heels, whereupon William came to a decisive halt. "Send that dog back," he said resolutely. "I'm not going through the streets with a dog like that, anyhow." Genesis chuckled.
"He ain't going back," he said. "Ain't nobody can make that dog go back. I ain't had him on 2 weeks, but I don't believe President United States could make that dog go back. I'll show you."
And wheeling suddenly, he made ferocious gestures, shouting,
"Gone back, dog!"
The dog turned, ran back a few paces, halted, and then began to follow again. Whereupon Genesis pretended to hurl stones at him, but the animal only repeated his maneuver. And he repeated it once more when William aided Genesis by using actual missiles, which were dodged with almost careless adeptness. "I'll show him," said William hotly. "I'll show him he can't follow me." He charged upon the dog, shouting fiercely, and this seemed to do the work, for the hunted animal, abandoning his partial flights, turned a tucked-under tail, ran all the way back to the alley, and disappeared from sight. "There," said William. "I guess that'll show him."
"I ain't betting on it,"
said Genesis as they went on.
"He never did stop following me yet. I reckon he the followingest dog in the world, named Clem."
"Well, he can't follow me," said the surging William, in whose mind's eye lingered the vision of an exquisite doglet with pink ribbon throat and a cottony head bobbing gently over a filmy sleeve. "He doesn't come within a mile of me, no matter what his name is."
"Named Clem for short,"
said Genesis amiably.
"I trade in a mandolin for him, what had her neck kind of busted off on one side. I couldn't play her nohow, and I found her anyways. Yes, sir, I trade in that mandolin for him 'cause I always did like to have me a good dog, but I didn't have me no name for him, and this here Bluey Bowers, what I trade in the mandolin to, he say he didn't have no name for him. Say Nev didn't know if was a name for him 'tall. So as I spend the evening at lady's house, Fanny, what used to be cook for Miss Johnson next door you ma's, and I asked Fanny what am I going to do about it. And Fanny say, 'Call him Clematis,' she say. 'That's a nice name,' she say, 'Clematis.' So that's his name I name him, Clematis. Call him Clem for short, but Clematis his real name. He'll come, whichever one you call him, Clem or Clematis. Make no difference to him, long's he get his victuals, Clem or Clematis, he ain't carin'."
William's ear was deaf to this account of the naming of Clematis. He walked haughtily, but as rapidly as possible, trying to keep a little in advance of his talkative companion. who had never received the training as a servitor which should have taught him his proper distance from the young master. William's suffering eyes were fixed upon remoteness, and his lips moved now and then like a martyr's, pronouncing inaudibly a sacred word. "Milady, oh, milady." Thus they had covered some 3 blocks of their journey, the 2 democratic Genesis chatting companionably, and William burning with mortification, when the former broke into loud laughter.
"What I tell you," he cried,
pointing ahead.
"Look at Yana. No, sir, President United States himself ain't go tell that dog stay home."
And there, at the corner before them, waited Clematis, roguishly lying in a mud puddle in the gutter. He had run through alleys parallel to their course, and in the face of such demoniac cunning the wretched William despaired of evading his society. Indeed, there was nothing to do but give up, and so the trio proceeded, with William unable to decide which contaminated him more, Genesis or the loyal Clematis. To his way of thinking, he was part of a dreadful pageant, and he winced pitiably whenever the eye of a respectable passer-by fell upon him. Everybody seemed to stare, nay, to leer, and he felt that the whole world would know his shame by nightfall. Nobody, he reflected, seeing him in such company, could believe that he belonged to one of the oldest and best families in town. Nobody would understand that he was not walking with Genesis for the pleasure of his companionship until they got the tubs and the wash boiler, when his social condition must be thought even more degraded. And nobody, he was shudderingly positive, could see that Clematis was not his dog. Clematis kept himself humbly a little in the rear, but how was any observer to know that he belonged to Genesis and not to William? And how frightful that this should befall him on such a day, the very day that his soul had been split asunder by the turquoise shaft of Milady's eyes, and he had learned to know the real thing at last. "Milady, oh, milady." For in the elder teens adolescence may be completed, but not by experience, and these years know their own tragedies. It is the time of life when one finds it unendurable not to seem perfect in all outward matters, in worldly position, in the equipments of wealth, in family, and in the grace, elegance, and dignity of all appearances in public. And yet the youth is continually betrayed by the child still intermittently insistent within him, and by the child which undiplomatic people too often assume him to be. Thus with William's attire. He could ill have borne any suggestion that he was not of the mode, but taking care of it was a different matter. Also, when it came to his appetite, he could and would eat anything at any time, but something younger than his years led him, often in semi-secrecy, to candy stores and soda-water fountains and ice-cream parlors. He still relished green apples and new cravings for other dangerous inedibles. But these survivals were far from painful to him. What injured his sensibilities was the disposition on the part of people, especially his parents, and frequently his aunts and uncles, to regard him as a little boy. Briefly, the deference his soul demanded in its own right, not from strangers only, but from his family, was about that which is supposed should be shown a Grand Duke visiting his estates. Therefore William suffered often. But the full ignominy of the task his own mother had set him this afternoon was not realized until he and Genesis set forth upon the return journey from the second-hand shop, bearing the 2 washtubs, a clothes wringer which Mrs. Baxter had forgotten to mention, and the tin boiler, and followed by the lowly Clematis. End of chapter 4.